The station was the biggest thing humans had ever walked inside. Station Orin floated between three star systems like a metal moon. It had been built 300 years ago by the Draxite Collective, and it was so large that its inner sky had clouds. Real clouds. They drifted slowly across the ceiling of the main hall, white and soft, like someone had stolen a piece of a real planet and put it inside a machine. In the floor was smooth black stone, shipped from a dead world at the edge of the galaxy. Every wall had carvings in languages most humans could not read. Every corridor smelled like something old and expensive. This was where the Galactic Council held its Centennial Summit. Once every 100 years, the most powerful rulers in the known galaxy gathered here to renegotiate the Galactic Accord, the agreement that kept the peace between species. It was not always a true peace. But it was better than open war, and everyone knew it. Ships had been arriving for 3 days. The Draxite king, Moro, came first. His vessel was the size of a small city. It had 7 wings and moved through space like a slow, patient predator. King Moro himself had 7 limbs and a face that looked like it had been carved from dark stone. He walked into the station with 200 guards behind him and did not look at anything below his eye level. He was the most powerful king in the council. He knew it. He made sure everyone else knew it too. After Moro came the Farah Empress. Her ship was made of crystal and caught the light of nearby stars as it docked. She was thin, almost translucent, and moved like water. She smiled at everything but meant none of it. Her people controlled the largest trade routes in the galaxy. Smiling cost her nothing and bought her everything. Then came the Noon, not in a ship exactly, but in a sealed atmospheric container the size of a building. The Noon were a gas cloud species. They did not have faces or bodies in any way a human would recognize. They communicated through pressure changes and color shifts inside their container. They were ancient and strange and very, very smart. One by one, the delegations arrived. Great ships, grand entrances, long robes and tall guards and speeches no one fully believed. The docking halls filled with the noise of 100 different languages and the smells of 100 different worlds. And then, almost at the very end, came the Earth delegation. One ship, a mid-sized transport vessel called the Hangang, clean and functional and not very impressive next to the crystal warship of the Far Empress. It docked quietly at Bay 31, near the back. No ceremony, no crowd waiting. 2 people walked out. The first was Ambassador Rena. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a calm face. She had spent 15 years preparing for this moment, and she was not going to waste it being nervous. She walked with her chin up and her hands steady, and she looked at the enormous station like she had every right to be there. Because she did. The second was Sentinel Prime Day. He was her assigned security escort, just one. The Council had allowed Earth a single security personnel, and Commander Bori had chosen Day without much debate. His Day had fought in 2 wars, survived 3 field deployments in deep space, and had a file full of commendations that he never talked about. He was not the tallest man or the loudest. He had a plain face and short dark hair, and an expression that rarely changed. He wore his uniform like it was just clothes. He stepped out of the ship, looked at the enormous station, and said, "Huh." That was it. Rena glanced at him. "Is that all you have to say?" "It's big," he said. I've seen big things before." They were given a room in the eastern wing of the station, the smallest wing, naturally. The Earth delegation's table in the main council chamber was near the back, small and undecorated. Some of the alien staff did not even acknowledge them when they arrived. One Draxite official looked at Rena's name tag, looked at Dai, and then simply walked away without speaking. Rena straightened her jacket. "Welcome to galactic politics," she said quietly. AD looked at the back of the departing official. "Friendly place." In the main hall that evening, the delegations mixed and talked and made careful, polite conversation that everyone knew was actually negotiation. Moro held court near the far window, surrounded by smaller kings who laughed at everything he said. The Farah Empress moved through the room like she owned it, stopping to speak with whoever was most useful to her at that moment. Rena worked the room carefully. She had studied every species here, every custom, every known preference. She introduced herself with the right words in the right language to each delegate she approached. She was good at this. Very good. Day stayed close but said little. He watched everything: the room, the exits, the guards, the body language of kings who smiled too much. He ate something from a small plate that a server handed him. He wasn't sure what it was, but it tasted a little like toasted grain and a little like copper, and he kept watching. At one point, a large Draxite guard stepped close to him and looked him up and down with open contempt. The guard was twice Day's size and carrying a weapon that crackled with low energy at its tip. Day looked at the weapon, looked at the guard, ate another piece of the copper-tasting food. The guard walked away. Rena appeared at his side. Tuna, you handled that well. Nothing happened. Exactly. It was near the end of the evening when the announcement came. A station official stepped to the front of the main hall and spoke in Galactic Common, the shared trade language everyone used at council events. His voice was steady, but his hands were not. Princess Yura of the Velshara Empire, he said, would be attending the summit in person. The room went very quiet. Then it went loud again, but in a different way. The kind of loud that is actually many quiet conversations happening very fast. Day watched King Moro's face change. The big, confident king suddenly looked like a man who had just stepped on something in the dark and wasn't sure what it was. 3 alien kings sent immediate requests to the station director asking permission to leave the summit early. One of the smaller delegates simply sat down on the floor. Rena leaned close to Day. The Velshara are the oldest species in the galaxy, and Yura is. The records about her are difficult to read. She has a psychic presence so strong it has been known to break minds. Warship crews, diplomatic staff, even experienced kings. Day chewed his food thoughtfully. She sounds like a lot. She is apparently the most dangerous being alive. He was quiet for a moment. Then, is she actually going to cause trouble? Or do people just think she will? Rena blinked. Iris, does that distinction matter right now? It usually does. She stared at him for a moment. Then she exhaled slowly and looked back at the room full of frightened alien kings. You are either the right person for this assignment or the completely wrong one. I genuinely cannot tell yet. Day set his empty plate down on a passing server's tray. Probably fine either way, he said. Across the room, King Moro was already gathering his advisors in a tight, worried cluster. The Far Empress had stopped smiling. The noon container pulsed a deep, anxious red. Day looked out the wide viewport at the dark space beyond the station. Somewhere out there, a ship was coming. The most feared ship in the galaxy, carrying the most feared person alive. He wondered briefly what she actually looked like. Then he wondered if there was any more of that copper-tasting food. It had been pretty good. The ship arrived at dawn. My station Orin did not have a real sunrise. It was a space station, not a planet, but its lighting systems were set to follow a slow cycle that felt like morning and evening. The artificial light was just beginning to shift from deep blue to pale gold when the Velshara vessel came out of fold space and appeared outside the station's main viewport. Everyone who was awake at that hour stopped what they were doing. The ship was black. Not dark gray, not dark blue. Black. Or the way a shadow is black when there is nothing behind it. It was enormous, but not in the way King Moro's ship was enormous. Moro's ship was big like a building is big. The Velshara vessel was big like a storm is big. It moved slowly, without any visible engine glow, as if space itself was simply making room for it. It had no wings, no weapon pods, no visible docking arms. Just a long, smooth shape that curved in ways that were hard to follow with the eye. Day had woken early, and as he usually did. He was standing at the viewport in the corridor outside his room with a cup of hot barley tea he had made from his personal kit, watching the ship come in. He thought it was impressive. He also thought the barley tea could have been slightly hotter. The docking took 20 minutes. By the time Princess Yura stepped off her ship, word had spread through the entire station. The main corridor outside the docking bay was lined with alien delegates, station staff, and guards, not to greet her warmly, but because they could not quite make themselves look away. Fear and fascination tend to arrive together. Rena was there. She had dressed carefully in Earth's formal diplomatic colors and stood very still with her hands folded in front of her. Beside her, Day stood in his sentinel uniform with his usual expression, calm, present, and giving nothing away. Princess Yura walked through the docking bay doors. She was tall, taller than most of the alien kings, and those kings were not small beings. Her skin was silver, not painted silver, but naturally silver, like the inside of a shell pulled from a deep ocean. Her hair was white and fell straight and long behind her. Her eyes were dark, not brown or black, but the color of deep space where there are no stars, deep and wide and completely still. She wore a long robe of dark material that moved like liquid and made no sound. She wore no crown. She did not need one. Beside her walked Lord Veth, her high priest and closest advisor. He was older, silver-skinned like all Velshara, but with age lines at the corners of his eyes. And he moved with the careful, deliberate steps of a man who had spent his life in proximity to something very powerful and had learned to be very, very careful. That was it. Two people. No army, no guard wall, no weapon display. The silence in the corridor was total. And then the pressure hit. It was not sound. It was not light. It was something that had no good name in any human language. But the closest word was weight, a psychic weight that rolled ahead of Yura like a tide, invisible but absolutely real. It was the accumulated presence of 4,000 years of life and power and authority, compressed into one being and radiating outward without effort or intention. She was not even trying. This was simply what she was. The alien delegates reacted immediately. A Draxite official grabbed the wall. A Fara attaché made a sharp clicking sound and bent at the waist. Several station staff members stumbled backward. One of Moro's personal guards, a large and heavily armored being, made a low sound of distress and sat down very suddenly on the floor. Rena gripped the edge of the doorway beside her. Her knuckles went pale. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes stayed open and forward, but the effort was visible. She was experienced and disciplined, and she held herself together, but it was work. A Day stood next to her and felt something, a hum, like the low buzz of electrical equipment in a quiet room. A slight pressure behind his eyes, not painful, just present. It reminded him, in a distant way, of the ringing his ears made after a long mission in a loud deployment zone. Background noise. His body noted it and filed it away as not immediately relevant. He took a sip of his barley tea. Yura walked down the corridor. Her eyes moved across the gathered beings with the same slow, unhurried attention a person gives to furniture in an unfamiliar room. She was not cruel. She was not performing. She was simply present, in the way that mountains are present, not trying to be large, just being it. Her gaze swept across Rena, and Rena made a sound low in her throat and looked at the floor for a moment before forcing her eyes back up. Then Yura's gaze reached Dai. She stopped walking. Lord Veth almost walked into her back. He caught himself and went very still beside her, his eyes moving quickly between her face and the human she was looking at with clear confusion. Day looked back at her. He nodded. A small, polite nod, the way you might acknowledge someone in a corridor when you aren't sure if you know them, but it seems rude not to say something. Yura did not move. In 4,000 years, no being had ever, in a moment of first contact under the full weight of her presence, simply nodded at her. They bowed. They knelt. They wept. They spoke too quickly or not at all. They looked away or stared with the wide eyes of animals that know they are near something that could end them. This human looked at her with mild, pleasant attention, like she was something slightly interesting he had noticed on his way to somewhere else. She studied his face. She was, among other things, a powerful reader of minds and emotions. From every being in this corridor, she felt fear. Layers of it, different colors and temperatures of fear. But all fear. From the humans, she felt curiosity. Mild and genuine curiosity, the way a person feels when they see an unusual bird outside a window. Nothing else. She turned her head very slightly toward Veth and said, in Velshara, "What is that creature?" Veth kept his voice carefully neutral. "A human, your radiance. The species from the third planet of the Sol system. They are a relatively new member of the Council." A pause. "They are considered minor." Yura looked at the human again. King Moro appeared at the far end of the corridor, having pushed his way forward with his usual confidence. He was already speaking in a loud, smooth voice, the voice of a king who wanted to be heard. Your Radiance, it is the great honor of the Draxite Collective to welcome you to this summit. We have long awaited. Yura did not look at him. She was still looking at Day. Moro slowed, then stopped. His voice died in his throat. He was not used to being ignored. He was also suddenly, remembering exactly who he was trying to interrupt. Day glanced at Moro, then back at the princess. Then he looked at Rena and said quietly, "Should I be doing something? Bowing or something?" Rena made a very controlled sound. "Probably," she whispered. "Yes, probably that." Day looked back at Yura. He nodded again, slightly deeper this time. Something crossed Yura's face, fast and gone quickly, but Veth saw it. In 40 years of serving her, he had learned to read the small things. What crossed her face was not anger, and it was not amusement, and it was not the cool disregard she showed almost everything. It was interest, actual, genuine interest. She walked on. The corridor emptied behind her as beings moved aside, and the wave of pressure moved with her, leaving people slowly straightening, breathing out, unclenching their hands. The atmosphere of the corridor returned to something close to normal. Moro stood where he had stopped, still unacknowledged. Oh, his mouth was a flat line. Rena let out a very long and quiet breath. Then she turned to look at Day. "She stopped," she said. "She actually stopped. Do you understand how unusual that is?" "She seemed fine," he said. "She seemed... Day, she has broken the minds of warship crews." He considered this. She didn't seem like she was trying to break anything. Rena stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked back toward their rooms, rubbing her temple with 2 fingers. "What weird week," she muttered. "It is going to be a very weird week." Day finished his barley tea and followed her. Behind them, at the far end of the corridor, Lord Veth stood alone for a moment, watching the direction the humans had gone. He had a small frown on his face, not a troubled frown, but the frown of a man who has just seen something new and is trying to understand what it means. He had served Princess Yura for 40 years. He had watched kings fall to their knees and emperors lose their words in her presence. He had watched powerful beings reduced to silence and stillness by simply being near her. He had never, not once, seen her stop walking because of someone else. He filed this away carefully and went to catch up with her. The observation gallery on the station's western side was not a popular place. Most delegates preferred the main hall, where the politics happened and the right people could see them standing next to other right people. The observation gallery was just a long corridor with one full wall made of thick, clear material, open to the view of deep space. No chairs, no servers, no important conversations to overhear. Just the dark and the stars and the slow turning of a distant gas giant that sat at the edge of this particular system, enormous and rust-colored and patient. Day liked it immediately, and he had found it by accident on his second morning, following a corridor that looked like it went somewhere interesting. It did not go anywhere important, which turned out to be exactly what he wanted. He started going there in the evenings, after the formal sessions ended, and Rena went to her room to review notes and prepare for the next day. He would stand at the clear wall with whatever he had brought to eat and look at the gas giant and think about nothing in particular. It was the third evening when he heard steps behind him. He had brought a self-heating meal pack, rice and dried fish, standard deep space ration, made by a company back home that had been supplying military personnel for 60 years. He had just opened it, and the smell of warm rice filled the small gallery, familiar and quiet, and completely out of place on a station full of alien food and alien smells. He heard the steps and half turned, expecting a station staff member. And it was not a staff member. Yura walked into the gallery the same way she walked everywhere, without hurry, without announcement, as if any space she entered had always been intended for her. She wore a simpler robe than the one from her arrival, dark gray, almost plain by Velshara standards. Her silver hair was loosely arranged instead of formal. She looked, if not exactly casual, then at least slightly less like she was about to redraw the borders of 3-star systems. She was alone. No Veth, no guards, no staff. The moment she stepped into the corridor, every other person in it, two station technicians and a Fora diplomatic aide, who had apparently also been trying to find a quiet spot, felt her presence hit them like a wave and moved immediately in the other direction. Fast, quiet, without a word, they were simply gone. Dai watched them go. Then he looked at Yura. Then he looked back out at the gas giant. "Evening," he said. She stopped a few steps away from him. So as she looked at the space outside the clear wall, she seemed to be deciding something. Then she walked to the wall and stood beside him. They were both quiet for a moment. The gas giant turned slowly outside. A small moon was just becoming visible at its lower edge, catching the light of the distant sun. Day looked at his meal pack. He looked at her. He held out a small piece of the dried fish. She looked at his hand. She looked at the food. This was not something that had ever happened to her. No one had ever offered her food from their own hand, like she was a person they had just met at a shared table. Kings offered her elaborate feasts with 100 dishes. Beings offered her gifts wrapped in expensive material. No one had ever just held out a small piece of dried fish and waited to see what she did. She took it. She did not eat it. She held it between two fingers and looked at it with careful attention, as if she was reading information from it. "Rice," Day said, he gesturing at his pack, "and fish, dried. It is not exciting, but it is familiar. I bring it from home on long deployments." She said nothing. He was not bothered by the silence. He ate a spoonful of rice and looked at the stars. After a while, she spoke. Her galactic common was perfect. 4,000 years gave a person time to learn languages. "You are not afraid of me," she said. It was not a question. "No," he said. "Why not?" He thought about it. He was the kind of person who thought about things before answering them, which some people found frustrating and which he considered simply correct. "I don't know you yet," he said. "It doesn't seem fair to be afraid of someone before they have actually done something to you." She was quiet again. Then, "Many beings are afraid before I do anything. The fear comes from what I am." "I know, I've seen it." He ate another spoonful. "It seems exhausting for you, honestly, when everyone flinching all the time." She turned her head and looked at him. He was looking at the gas giant. He had the focused, easy expression of someone watching something they find genuinely interesting. "You are a warrior," she said. "Yes. Warriors understand power. They understand what it means to face something stronger." "Sure," he said. "I've faced plenty of things stronger than me. Most of the time I was scared. But I was scared because those things were trying to kill me." "Ah, you're just standing here." Something shifted very slightly in her posture. Not a movement exactly. More like a pressure releasing. Very small. "What is it like," she said after a pause, "to not fear death?" He looked at her then, not surprised by the question, just looking at her, reading it. "I never said I don't fear death. I'm afraid of dying. Everyone I know is afraid of dying. I've watched people I cared about die, and it was terrible." He paused. But being afraid of dying and being afraid of living are two different things. I'm not afraid of living, so I keep doing it." She considered this for a long time. Long enough that Dave finished his rice and folded the empty pack and put it in his jacket pocket out of habit, because you didn't litter in spaces where other people had to live. "You said you do not know me yet," she said. "Most beings assume they know me from what they have heard." "I've heard things," he admitted. "Warships, mines. What doesn't sound great, but I've also heard plenty of things about humans that aren't accurate." He looked at her. "What are you actually like?" She blinked, slowly. The question seemed to arrive somewhere deep behind her eyes and find nothing ready to answer it, because no one had asked it before. Not like that, not simply. Not as if the answer would be interesting, but not world-changing. "I do not know how to answer that," she said, and her voice was quieter than it had been. "Oh, and that's all right," he said. "You don't have to." She held the small piece of dried fish still. She had not eaten it and was not going to. Velshara did not eat solid food, but she had not put it down either. At the far end of the summit's main corridor, in a secure room lined with surveillance screens, King Moro sat in a wide chair and watched the feed from the observation gallery. His 7 limbs were very still. Beside him stood three advisors and the king of a smaller system who owed him political favors. They watched the princess of the Velshara Empire standing at a viewport with a human having a conversation. No one in the room spoke for a full minute. Then Moro said in a low voice, "Find out everything there is to know about that human." One of his advisors nodded and left quickly. Moro watched the screen. I'd watched the human say something that made Yura turn her head slightly in a way that, in 40 years of political observation, Moro had never seen her turn her head. Like she was listening. Actually listening, the way you listen when something is new. "This is a problem," Moro said. The remaining advisors did not disagree. Back in the gallery, Day and Yura were quiet again. The gas giant filled the lower half of the viewport now. Rust and amber and deep brown were beautiful in the way that large and patient things are beautiful. "What is your world like?" she asked. He smiled a little. It was a small smile, but a real one. "Loud," he said. "Crowded. The sky is blue in the daytime, and the weather is unpredictable. There are too many people and not enough space, and everyone argues about everything all the time." He paused. "I miss it constantly." She looked at the stars. "I have not been somewhere I missed," she said. "Ever in a very long time." He looked at her face, the clean lines of it, the stillness, the eyes that held so much depth they were hard to look at directly, like trying to see the bottom of a very deep ocean. "That sounds lonely," he said. She did not answer, but she didn't leave either. She stayed at the viewport until the gas giant had rotated another quarter turn and the small moon had moved to the other side of it. And the station's lights had begun their slow shift toward the blue of artificial night. And when she finally left, she still had the piece of dried fish in her hand. Day watched her go. Then he looked back at the stars and stood there a while longer, thinking about deep oceans and loud, crowded worlds, and the way some people carried their whole lives in the silence around them. Then he went to bed. He had a full day of standing near important conversations tomorrow. He needed the rest. Our King Moro did not sleep that night. He sat in the large dark room his delegation had been given, and he thought. Moro was not the oldest of the kings at this summit. He was not the most ancient or the most mysterious, but he was the most powerful in practical terms. The largest fleet, the most territory, the most votes in the council chamber. He had spent 60 years building that position carefully, slowly. He had made alliances and broken them at the right times. He had smiled at beings he wanted to destroy, and destroyed beings who thought he was smiling with them. He understood power the way a builder understands a structure. Every beam, every joint, every place where the weight sat and where it didn't. He had understood the balance of the Galactic Council for a long time. The Velshara were the wild element. Yura was the wild element. She was too old and too powerful for anyone to control, so the strategy had always been to leave her alone. Do not draw her attention. Do not give her a reason to involve herself in council politics. Let her sit at the edge of everything, feared and distant, and work around her like water works around a stone. It had worked for 200 years. Now a human had sat with her in an empty corridor and given her food from his own hand, and she had stayed there for 2 hours and left with something still in her fingers. Moro called a private meeting before the morning session. He chose 4 kings carefully, not the largest or the most obvious. Those were too visible. He chose kings who were afraid, because afraid kings were useful kings. He found them in a secondary conference room on a floor that the surveillance systems did not fully cover, which he knew because he had spent money ensuring it 3 days before the summit began. They sat in a rough circle. The lights were low. Outside the small viewport, the rust-colored gas giant was still turning. One Moro did not explain everything. He gave them what they needed to know. The human had captured the attention of the princess. If Yura formed even an informal interest in Earth, not a treaty, not even an alliance, just a preference, the balance shifted. Earth would rise. Influence would move. The careful structure Moro had spent 60 years building would develop a crack he could not control. Then we should simply block any formal proposal, said one king, a thin, pale being from a system near the outer edge. In the council chamber, with votes. She does not need the council chamber, Moro said. His voice was patient. She is Velshara. If she decides Earth is under her interest, she says so, And it is done. Our votes mean nothing. Quiet around the circle. Then the human must go, said another king. A wider, darker being with flat round eyes that blinked in a slow, deliberate rhythm. If the connection between them is removed, yes, said Morrow. And how? Morrow had already thought about this. He laid it out simply. A Velshara guard would be found injured. The guard would claim the human had attacked him. Station security, which the Draxite Collective largely staffed, as a courtesy of their having built the station, would arrest the human. Under galactic law, an assault on a member of a royal retinue while on neutral ground carried severe penalty. The case would move to a tribunal. The human would be removed from the summit and most likely sent home, if not held for a longer process. It was clean. It was documented. It gave Morrow the position of simply following law, which was a place he had learned to stand whenever possible. The kings in the circle considered it. One of them asked the question Morrow had expected. What if she intervenes? She has never intervened for anyone, Morrow said, in 4,000 years. She does not get involved in the affairs of what she considers lesser beings. She watches. She exists. She does not act for other people's benefit. It is not her nature. He believed this fully. He had studied Europe for decades. It was, in all observable history, accurate. He was about to be wrong for the first time in 60 years, but he did not know that yet. The next morning, while Rena was in the council chamber reviewing the morning agenda, and Day was doing a quiet walk of the eastern corridor as part of his regular check of their area, Commander Bori sent a message. Bori was not on the station. He was back on Earth's relay ship, 2 light minutes away, coordinating with the delegation from a distance. But he had contacts. The Kepler Wars had given him contacts across 6 species, it including a low-ranking Farah official who had once owed him a favor and apparently still felt the weight of it. The message was short. It said, "Someone is planning to frame you. Don't be alone tonight." Day read it twice. He sent back, "Details?" The reply came in pieces over the next hour as Bori assembled what his contact had told him. By the time Rena came out of the morning session, Day was waiting for her in the corridor, with both hands in his jacket pockets and a calm, slightly distant expression on his face. She recognized that expression. "What happened?" he told her. Rena sat down on a bench near the corridor wall and was quiet for a moment. Then she pressed 2 fingers to her temple and closed her eyes briefly, which was her version of a strong emotional reaction. "They're going to frame you for attacking a royal guard. That's what Bori's contact says. So they can have you arrested, removed from the summit? They'd send a message to Earth." She opened her eyes. "Because she talked to you. Apparently. Day, do you understand what this means? This is King Morrow. We cannot go against Morrow in the council. He controls too many votes, too much of the station infrastructure. If he pushes the arrest through, we don't have the political weight to stop it, and we—" She stopped. "We need to contact the Velshara. We need to tell her what's happening." Day was quiet for a moment. "And ask her to save me." "Yes." He looked at the floor. Not because he was afraid, but because he was thinking about something she hadn't said, about what it meant to run to someone powerful and put your problem in their hands, about what kind of person that made you in this situation, and what it meant for the summit and for Earth, and for how the story of this week would be told afterward. "Let's gather the evidence Bori has first," he said. "All of it. Document it. Make it a record." "Day? We don't ask for help before we can make a real case," he said. It was not stubborn. It was clear. "We build what we have, and then we decide who we take it to." Rena looked at him for a moment. Then she nodded once and started composing a message to Bori. That same afternoon, in a section of the station's staff quarters, a Velshara guard named in the plan quietly agreed to do what Morrow's people needed him to do. He was not Velshara royal staff. He was a secondary guard from the outer retinue, someone with debts and poor judgment. He was found at the end of the day shift, leaning against a wall near the human delegation's wing, with visible marks on his arm and a prepared statement already memorized. Station security, Draxite staffed, as Morrow had arranged, responded to the report within minutes. They found Day in the eastern corridor. He was standing still when they arrived, not running, not hiding, not making any move that could be described later as resistance. Both hands were visible. His face was exactly as calm as it always was, which in that moment, the lead security officer found deeply strange. "Sentinel Prime Day," the officer said, reading from his device. "You are being detained in connection with an assault on a member of the Velshara royal retinue." Day nodded. "All right, you will come with us." "Yes," he said, and he went, quietly without argument, and without the anger or the panic the security team had half expected from a being facing false imprisonment on a foreign station in the middle of deep space. 2 corridors away, Rena stood frozen for a moment when one of the station staff told her. Then she moved, fast, sharp, purposeful, back toward their room to reach Bori and assemble everything they had. 3 floors above, in the private chambers of the Velshara section of the station, Lord Veth knocked on Princess Yura's door and opened it and told her what had happened. He described the arrest carefully and completely. He told her the human's name. He told her where he had been taken. Yura was sitting at a long, dark table looking at nothing. On the table in front of her, set beside a small carved object from her ship, was a piece of dried fish. She was quiet for a long moment after Veth finished speaking. Then she stood up. "Your Radiance," Veth said carefully. "Anro, if you intend to find out which detention block they have taken him to," she said. Veth looked at her. He opened his mouth. He closed it. "Yes," he said. "Your Radiance." He went to find out. In 60 years of service, he had drafted her correspondence and prepared her schedule and watched kings fall to pieces in her presence. He had done everything she required without surprise. He was right now very surprised. And despite the seriousness of the situation, and there was a very small part of him, a quiet, private part that he would never admit to out loud, that felt something almost like hope. The detention block was in the lower section of the station, below the main residential and diplomatic floors. It was not large, Station Orin was not a prison ship, and the detention area had been built for minor infractions, not serious holding. It had 12 cells, plain walls, and lighting that stayed at the same flat level all day and night so that you lost track of time quickly if you stayed long enough. Day had been in worse places. He sat on the flat bench against the cell wall and looked at the opposite wall and thought. Not about escape. There was no point thinking about escape when you hadn't yet decided whether escaping was the right move. Not about fear. He had been afraid before in much more immediate ways than this, and this didn't rank. However, he thought about the situation, the pieces of it, what Morrow wanted, what Morrow expected to happen, and where those expectations might be wrong. The guard outside his cell was Draxite, large, stone gray, with 2 of his 7 limbs folded across his front in the Draxite posture that meant professional but not friendly. He had not spoken since placing Day in the cell. Day had not tried to start a conversation. They existed in a professional and mutual silence. Then the guard shifted. Day looked up. It was a small shift, just the guard's weight moving, his posture changing slightly. But it was the kind of shift a person makes when they feel something and don't know what to do with it. Day had seen it before, in soldiers before an engagement, in people who hear a sound in the dark. Then he felt it himself, the pressure, the low hum behind the eyes, the background weight that he had felt in the docking corridor and in the observation gallery, when that his nervous system processed as something between tinnitus and the feeling before a storm. It was moving down the corridor toward him. The Draxite guard stepped back from the door, not dramatically, just one step, then another. Then he found the wall and stayed against it, like a man in a river who has found something solid to hold. Then Yura walked into view. She walked past 3 empty cells without glancing at them. She stopped in front of his. She looked at him through the clear barrier. He looked back. "You did not have to come," he said. "I know," she said. She reached out and pressed the manual release on the outside of the cell door. No code, no request. The station systems apparently did not argue with her. The door opened with a soft mechanical sound. Day stood, picked up his jacket from the bench, and walked out. He glanced at the Draxite guard, who was still against the wall and very focused on something above and to the left that did not exist, but was easier to look at than the princess. "Is he going to be okay?" Day asked. "He will recover," Yura said. She was already walking back toward the main corridor. "Come," he followed. They walked through the lower section of the station in silence. Aunt Yura moving at the same unhurried pace she always moved, and every staff member they passed finding immediate and urgent reasons to be in a different direction. The station, around Yura, seemed to reorganize itself politely into emptiness. "The guard who accused me," Day said as they reached the elevator corridor. "He's not actually royal retinue, is he?" It was not quite a question. "No," she said. "He is a secondary staff member. He was paid to file the report." She said it without visible emotion, the way someone states a fact they have already fully absorbed. "King Moro?" "Almost certainly." The elevator doors opened. They stepped in. The doors closed, and for a moment they were in the small enclosed space together, and Yura's presence filled it the way her presence filled every space. Completely, gently, like water filling a glass. Day leaned against the wall and thought about what came next. "I want to present our evidence," he said, "in the council chamber, not have the charges quietly dropped. Actually present it." She looked at him. "If it disappears quietly, Moro keeps his position and his influence, and he tries something else," Day said. "It needs to be in the room, on record." "That will make an enemy of Moro directly," she said. "For your delegation, for Earth. He's already an enemy. He just paid someone to have me locked up." He looked at her. "A quiet ending helps him. Showing an open one helps Earth." She considered him for a moment. The elevator moved upward. "Most beings who find themselves in this position would be grateful to walk away from it. They would not choose to walk toward more conflict." "We have a word for that," he said. "We call it not being done yet." Something crossed her face. Not a smile exactly, but the shape of something that might have been the beginning of one. In a person who had not smiled for a long time and needed practice to remember the shape. The Grand Council chamber was a large circular room near the top of the station's main ring. It had seats arranged in tiers around a central floor, and every delegation sat at a carved stone table with their system's marker on it. The Earth table was near the back, small, undecorated. Yura walked in first. The room, which had been a storm of noise and movement. Delegations preparing their morning notes. She staff moving between tables. A background layer of conversation in 6 languages. Went silent in approximately 2 seconds. Beings sat down or stood very still. The Farah Empress put down whatever she had been holding. King Moro at the center left table went very still. Yura walked to the center floor without being announced. She stood there with her hands at her sides and she spoke in Galactic Common, clear and even. And she said that the charges filed against the human Sentinel Prime were fabricated. She said she knew who had arranged it. She said the summit would hear the evidence. Moro found his voice. He was good at finding his voice. 60 years of practice. He said in his most measured and authoritative tone that this was a serious accusation, that station security had followed procedure, and that one being's personal interest in a minor delegate was not a basis for dismissing filed charges. Or the room went even quieter because Moro had just, in the most polished political language possible, told the princess of the Velshara Empire that her opinion was personal and therefore irrelevant. Yura turned and looked at him. The psychic weight in the room shifted, not expanding, just focusing. The way light focuses when you hold a glass to it. It moved toward Moro and settled on him like a hand pressing down on his shoulders, his chest, the back of his neck. It and all of the 7 limbs that held him upright in his chair. Moro made a sound, low and involuntary. He pressed back into his chair and he did not speak again. The room breathed very carefully, and then Dai walked in. He walked to the center floor and stood next to Yura. Not behind her, not at a respectful half-step. Beside her, at the same level. He had a data chip in his hand that held everything Bori had gathered. The contact records, the financial transfer to the guard, with a written statement from the fair official who had given Bori the warning. He presented it to the chamber, calmly in Galactic Common, which he spoke badly but correctly enough to be understood. He stated the facts in the order they had happened. He did not accuse with emotion. He reported with evidence, the way he had been trained to report anything from a field situation. Situation, facts, supporting material. Conclusion. The chamber was silent throughout. When he finished, watched the council's head arbiter, An old being from a neutral species, not affiliated with any of the major powers, took the chip and reviewed its contents on his screen. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said that the charges against Sentinel Prime Day were dismissed. He also said that the evidence presented indicated a deliberate fabrication designed to interfere with the delegated rights of a council member. And he noted that this constituted a formal violation of the Galactic Accord that governed the summit. King Moro was formally censured. His name in the censure would go into the council record permanently. The guard who had filed the false report was held for processing. 3 of the 4 kings who had been in Moro's private meeting, apparently deciding that Moro was no longer worth protecting, quietly submitted corroborating statements to the arbiter over the next 2 hours. Moro sat in his chair through all of it, perfectly still, with the expression of a man watching 60 years of careful construction develop a crack that no amount of repair would fully close. After the session, in the corridor outside the chamber, the head arbiter made one more announcement that no one had expected. The Earth delegation had demonstrated conduct fully consistent with full council membership. He was recommending an immediate upgrade of Earth's status from junior member to full member of the Galactic Accord. Rena heard it from the corridor entrance, where she had arrived just as the session ended. She stood very still for a moment, and then she sat down on a bench and she put her face in her hands. Not from sadness, but from the very specific exhaustion of someone who has been holding everything together tightly for a long time and has just been told they can stop now. AD found her there a few minutes later. He sat beside her. "We got the upgrade," she said, her voice slightly muffled by her hands. "Yeah. Earth is a full member of the Galactic Council." "Yeah. Because you got arrested." He thought about it. "That's one way to put it." She laughed. It was the tired, real laugh of someone who is genuinely relieved. "You are the strangest security detail I have ever had." He considered this as a fair assessment. Behind them, at the far end of the corridor, one Lord Veth stood with his hands folded and watched his princess standing at the chamber exit, watching the humans from a careful distance with those deep, still eyes. He had seen her in 4,000 years do many things. He had watched her reshape systems and end conflicts and make kings understand their smallness. He had watched her be magnificent and terrible and untouchable and alone. He had never watched her look at someone the way she was looking at the human now, with the careful, quiet attention of a person who has found something they did not expect and are not sure yet what to do with the finding. He decided privately that whatever it meant, it was probably good. After 4,000 years, something genuinely new seemed, on balance, like a gift. He straightened his robe and went to prepare her schedule for the evening. The invitation came late that evening. Not a formal message through the station's diplomatic system. Nothing stamped with seals or routed through the proper council channels. Just Veth, appearing at the door of the Earth delegation's room with his hands folded and a very careful expression on his face, saying that the princess had asked if Sentinel Prime Dai would come aboard the Velshara vessel at his convenience. Dai was sitting on his bed polishing his boot, which he did when he needed to think. He looked at Veth. He looked at the boot. He set it down. "When?" he said. "Now, if it is acceptable," Veth said. Rena was at her desk. She had turned around very slowly when Veth knocked and was now sitting with both hands flat on her desk like she needed the surface to anchor herself. She stared at Dee. He looked at her. "I'll be back," he said. "Dai," she said carefully. "That ship is the Velshara flagship. It is 4,000 years old and carries weapons that have not been used in 6 centuries because there has been nothing in 6 centuries worth using them on. No human has ever been aboard a Velshara vessel." "I know. And you are just going to go?" "She asked." Rena opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You know what? Fine. Go. Be the first human on a Velshara ship. I will be here updating my emergency contact forms." He picked up his jacket and followed Veth out the door. The walk to the docking bay took 10 minutes. The Velshara vessel was connected to the station by a bridge that the ship had extended itself. A smooth, dark tunnel of material that felt slightly warm underfoot, like the floor was alive, which Day suspected might literally be true. The inside of the bridge smelled like deep space. Not the recycled mechanical air of a station, but something cleaner and colder, like high altitude on a mountain at night. And the inside of the ship was vast and quiet. It was not decorated the way you might expect from the oldest empire in the galaxy. There were no gold surfaces or display cases of trophies. The walls were dark and smooth, made from material that shifted slightly in color as he moved. Deep blue to dark gray to a very deep green at the edges. The lighting came from no visible source, just a general soft glow that existed the way starlight exists, all around and from nowhere. The ship felt like being inside something that was thinking. Veth led him through 3 corridors and stopped at a wide doorway. He stepped aside. Day walked in. The room was a long chamber with one full wall open to space. Not a viewport with glass, but open, though no air rushed out, which suggested a field of some kind that looked like nothing. Just stars, visible and near, with the distant blue arc of one of the system's planets at the bottom edge. In the center of the room, at a long dark table, Yura was sitting. She was not in formal robes. She wore something dark and simple, and her white hair was loose. Around the room, on low shelves and surfaces, were objects, small things, old things, a curved piece of stone, a dried flower of a species Day did not recognize, a piece of dark wood, scarred in one corner, a sealed jar containing something luminescent that shifted slowly in its own light. 4,000 years of small objects that had mattered to her at different moments. She gestured toward the chair across the table from her. He sat down. They were quiet for a moment. Outside the open wall, the stars were very bright and very still. I have lived 4,000 years, she said, not as a boast, just as a fact she was beginning with, the way you begin with a number when the number is the point. In that time, I have spoken to thousands of beings, won kings and emperors and generals and scholars. I have made agreements that lasted centuries. I have ended conflicts that would have killed millions. He listened. Every agreement, she said, was built on fear. Every king who came to my table came because they were afraid of what I would do if they refused. Every treaty was signed because the other side had calculated that opposing me cost more than agreeing with me. She looked at the table surface. Mard and I have never made an agreement because someone wanted to make one. Because someone looked at me and thought, I want to be in a room with this person. I want to know what they think. Dee didn't say anything. He was listening the way he listened to everything, completely, without planning his response while she was still talking. I found myself, she said slowly, looking forward to the observation gallery. She said it like she was still figuring out what it meant. Much I have not looked forward to a place in a very long time. I have not looked forward to a conversation. She paused. You did not speak to me like a king speaks, or a subject, or anyone I have known. How did I speak to you? He said. Like I was a person who happened to be nearby. She looked up. It sounds like a small thing. It isn't, he said. No, she agreed, it is not. Outside the open wall, a piece of debris drifted past. Something small, old, probably left over from the station's construction centuries ago. They both watched it pass. The galaxy was full of old things drifting slowly. What is it like, he said carefully, to know that everyone around you is afraid? She was quiet for a while. You stop expecting anything else, she said. You build your understanding of relationships around it. You learn to work with fear because it is the only material available. You get very good at it. A pause. And then it is all you have. A very effective, very empty. Yeah, he said. He said it simply without making it a big moment, just acknowledging it the way you acknowledge something true. She looked at him. You said your world is loud and crowded and everyone argues. All the time. And you miss it. Every day I'm not there. Why? She was not asking it as a political question or a philosophical one. She was asking it the way someone asks when they genuinely cannot access the answer from their own experience. And he thought about how to explain it. Because it's mine, he said. Because the people there are my people. Because even the arguments mean someone cares enough to have them. Silence is easy. Loud is harder. But loud means something is alive and happening. He looked at the stars outside. I think being afraid of everything around you would feel a lot like silence, even if it's technically noisy. She was very still. I want to propose an alliance, she said, between the Velshara Empire and Earth. He looked at her. Not a protection arrangement, she said. She said it firmly, clearly. not a contract where Earth trades something for Velshara defense and calls it partnership. A true alliance, mutual, equal terms. Both parties with obligations and both parties with benefits. She looked at him steadily. It is something I have never done. Not in 4,000 years. Every arrangement I have made has been from a position of power over the other party. What changed? He said. She considered the question seriously. You did not let me be powerful over you, she said. Not because you opposed it, but because it did not occur to you. You simply spoke to me as if we were the same size. She was quiet for a moment. I have wanted to be the same size as someone for a very long time. Day thought about what Rena would say when he told her. He thought about Commander Bori back on the relay ship, who had sent a warning message and probably had not expected it to lead here. He thought about Earth, loud and crowded, arguing about everything, small and blue and not very impressive from the outside. Earth will accept that, he said. I can't formally speak for our council, but I know them. They'll accept it. I know they will, she said. I know because you have told me what your people are like. And your people sound like beings who are very bad at accepting small things when larger things are available. He smiled. It was a wider smile than usual. We really are, he said. She looked at him for a moment longer, and something in her face was open. Not soft, not vulnerable in any way that could be used against her. Just open, the way a window is open when you have decided to let the air in. It was a look that had not been on her face for a very long time. One more thing, she said. She reached into a small box beside the table and set something down in front of him. It was the piece of dried fish. He looked at it. I meant to give this back, she said, the first night, but I kept carrying it. He looked at the fish. He looked at her. You can keep it, he said. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she picked it back up and held it again. Outside the open wall, the stars were endless, and the planet at the bottom edge was slowly getting brighter as the ship's angle shifted. And the galaxy was a very large place, with a very large amount of history in it, and most of that history had been built on fear. What was being built in this room, at this table, over a piece of dried fish and honest conversation, was not built on fear. That made it, in the context of 4,000 years, completely new. The following morning, at the closing ceremony of the Centennial Summit, Ishura stood in the Grand Council chamber and announced the alliance of mutual standing between the Velshara Empire and the Earth delegation. Full, equal, with no hierarchy between the two parties. The chamber was silent for 10 full seconds. Then everyone started talking at once. King Moro, sitting in his reduced position following the censure, said nothing. He simply looked at the center floor where Yura stood, and beside her, Sornekarn, the small human delegation, Rena standing at full height with her careful diplomat's face, and Day beside her, hands in his jacket pockets, watching the room with his usual calm expression. The most powerful king in the council looked at the most feared being in the galaxy standing willingly beside the smallest delegation in the room, and he understood, with the clear and final understanding of a man who has built his life on power, that he had made a mistake he could not undo. Earth, a might in 4 days, had gone from the back corner of the room to the center of everything. Rena, very quietly behind her calm diplomatic face, was absolutely overwhelmed. She kept it together because she was a professional and there were cameras. Day looked at the ceiling for a moment. The ceiling had its small artificial clouds drifting slow and white above everything. He thought they were nice. He still preferred the stars. The summit ended on a Thursday, and the station did not track days in the Earthway, but Dai did. He had kept a small count in the corner of his personal device since they arrived, the way soldiers keep counts on long deployments, because having a number for the day makes the day feel like it belongs to you rather than the other way around. Thursday, day 8. Closing ceremonies complete. Delegations departing. The docking bays were busy through the morning. Ships unlocked from their berths and moved out into open space in slow, careful procession. The Farah Empress departed without ceremony, her crystal vessel catching the distant starlight as it went. The Nuon container was loaded with particular care and moved on a special track system to its bay. The smaller kings left one by one, each with their own guards and their own silent relief at putting space between themselves and the summit, and most particularly between themselves and the presence that had occupied the station for the past week. King Moro left very early, before most delegations were even awake. His great ship, with the size of a small city, with its 7 wings, disengaged from the station without announcement and moved away at speed. No farewell message, no formal departure, just the absence where he had been. Day watched it go from the Western Observation Gallery, the one with the clear wall where the rust-colored gas giant sat outside. The planet was on the far side now, smaller from this angle. Howard, and the space outside the viewport was quieter than it had been all week. He had come here early before breakfast, before Rena was awake, before anything was required of him. He stood with his arms crossed and his back against the wall opposite the viewport, looking out. He thought about what this week had been and what it meant and where things went from here. He was not the kind of person who made lists of conclusions. He thought in a circular, quiet way, the same subject appearing and disappearing until it settled into something he could live with. The week kept appearing and disappearing. Strange week. He heard steps, familiar ones by now. Yura came into the gallery in the way she came everywhere, without announcement, filling the space with her presence the way the sun fills a room through a window. You notice it before you see the source. She was in her formal robes again, the dark ones that moved like liquid. Her white hair was arranged correctly for departure. "You are leaving today," he said. "Yes." She stood beside him, looking out at the gas giant. "My ship has been cleared for departure this afternoon." "And us? Earth?" He meant the delegation, but the way he said it was ambiguous enough that it could mean something else too, and both of them knew it. "Ambassador Rena has the formal documentation for the alliance," Yura said. "Veth has prepared everything required from the Velshara side. The ratification process will take some months. Your council will need to review and sign." A pause. "It is a large document. Veth is thorough." "He seems like someone who is thorough," Day agreed. They were quiet for a moment. "I will send a formal communication to your world," she said, "through the standard council channels, establishing the first point of regular contact between our two peoples." She said it in the careful, even way of someone who has thought about the next word specifically. "I would like to include a personal letter. To you. Separate from the formal documentation." He looked at her. She was looking at the gas giant. "I am not very practiced at personal letters," she said. "I have written thousands of formal ones, declarations and edicts in treaty language. But a personal letter to a specific person about something real rather than political." She paused. "Sri, I am not certain I remember how." "You'll figure it out," he said. "Write it like you're standing at a viewport talking to someone nearby." She considered this. That seems simple. Most useful things are. She turned her head and looked at him. She did it the way she had been looking at him all week. Direct and completely attentive, like he was the most interesting thing in any room he was in, which he knew was not true, but which was, regardless, a very specific kind of feeling. "And I have been trying," she said slowly, "to understand what it is about you that is different from other beings I have met. I have been thinking about it since the first night. And you are not fearless," she said. "You have told me yourself you are afraid of things. You have lost people. You know what it means to be in danger. You are not without the capacity for fear." She paused. "But you seem to have decided somewhere, when that being afraid of a thing and being stopped by it are two different things, that the fear is information, not instruction." He thought about that. "That's a good way to put it." "I did not come up with it," she said. "You did. I am simply reflecting it back." She looked at him. "It is a very human way of living." "We had to learn it," he said. "We were never the strongest species. We were never the fastest or the most advanced or the most powerful. We just kept going. Generation after generation, being afraid and going anyway. Fighting things we shouldn't have been able to fight. Surviving things we shouldn't have survived." He looked out at the gas giant. "After a few 100,000 years of that, it becomes part of who you are. You stop being surprised when something is bigger than you. You just look for the way through." She was quiet for a long time. "I want to understand that," she said. I want to understand it more than I understand it now." "Then write the letter," he said, "and I'll write back, and we'll have more of these." He gestured at the viewport, at the space between them, at the gallery in general. Conversations, she said. Yeah. About things that are real rather than political. Yeah. Something happened in her face then. The thing that had been building since the first nod in the docking corridor, and the thing that had almost appeared several times and retreated each time. It arrived. Slowly, and with the specific quality of something that is using muscles it hasn't used in a long time. She smiled. It was not large. It was not the kind of smile you put in a painting, but it was real, genuinely, completely real. And it changed her face in a way that made her look, for just a moment, not like 4,000 years of power and fear and solitary existence, but like a person who had just found something they had almost stopped looking for. Veth, who had come silently to the gallery entrance to let her know the departure timeline, saw it from the corridor. He stopped walking. He stood very still and looked at her face. In 40 years, he had never seen that expression. He turned quietly and went back the way he had come, because the timeline could wait 5 more minutes and some moments deserved the space around them. In the gallery, Tayura and Day stood at the viewport and watched the gas giant turn. They talked a little more, about small things, specific things, the way people talk when the time is ending, and they want to use what is left of it on real conversation rather than formal goodbyes. She asked him what season it was on Earth right now. He told her it depended on which part. She asked which part he was from. He told her. She said the name of the region back to him in an accent that was precise and slightly different from how he said it, which for some reason made him laugh quietly. When Veth appeared again at the gallery entrance, more visibly this time, with the expression of a man who truly, sincerely hates to interrupt. Yura straightened and looked at Day. I will write the letter, she said. I'll read it, he said. She extended her hand. He looked at it. He shook it. And her hand was cool and smooth and very still, like the surface of water before something moves through it. Then she walked out of the gallery and down the corridor toward her departure without looking back, because Velshara did not look back as a matter of practice, and 4,000 years of practice was a difficult thing to break in a week. Veth fell into step beside her. After a moment, very quietly, he said, Your radiance. Veth. That was, I have not seen you. He stopped, so started again. I am glad. She walked on. Yes, she said simply. So am I. The Hangang departed at mid-afternoon. It was a quiet departure, the same as the arrival. No ceremony, no crowd. Bay 31, the back of the station. Day stood in the small crew area near the front port while the ship cleared the docking bridge and moved into open space. Rena was at the communication terminal, already preparing her initial report. She had been writing and revising it in her head all week, and now that she could put it into actual words, she was very focused, which meant she did not look up when he sat down nearby. After a few minutes, she said without looking up, The report is going to be very difficult to write. Why? Because what actually happened does not sound believable. She continued typing. Earth's single security escort got arrested. He was released by the most feared being in the galaxy, who then publicly dismantled the most powerful king in the council, and Earth ended the summit as a full council member with a mutual alliance to the Velshara Empire. She paused. And the key turning point was you offering someone a piece of dried fish. It was good fish, he said. She stopped typing. She looked at him. He looked back with his usual expression, calm, present, giving nothing away. She shook her head and went back to the report. Outside the port, the Velshara vessel was still docked. Its black shape sat against the stars like an absence. As the Hangang cleared the station's outer ring, the Velshara ship began moving. Slowly, the way it moved everywhere, as if space was making room rather than being traveled through. It passed alongside the Hangang for a moment, close enough that the black hull filled the entire port view. Then it slowed. For approximately 4 seconds, Yammer, the largest, oldest, most feared warship in the known galaxy, slowed its departure to pace with a small human transport ship. 4 seconds. Then it moved on, accelerating smoothly into fold space, and was gone. Day watched the space where it had been. Then he looked at the stars for a while. 3 weeks later, back on Earth, he submitted his mission report. The section on notable incidents was thorough. The section on outcome was brief. Full council membership obtained. A mutual alliance with Velshara Empire established. See Ambassador Rena's formal report for details. Under personal notes, which was not a required field, and which most Sentinel Primes left blank, he wrote, "The princess is fine. She's got a good way of looking at things. Looking forward to the letters." Commander Bori read the report twice. He sat in his office for a long moment, looking at the last line. Then he approved the report, filed it under classified, and went to get coffee. Well, he was going to need it, because in 3 weeks, the first formal Velshara communication to Earth had arrived, addressed to the Council but accompanied by a separate sealed letter, marked personal, for one Sentinel Prime day. He did not read the letter. It was not his to read. But he could tell from the weight of it that it was not short. 4,000 years had a lot to say, it turned out, once someone came along who actually wanted to hear it. Far out in the galaxy, the balance had shifted. Not because of a battle, not because of a weapon or a fleet or a political strategy built over decades. Because one human looked at the most feared being alive and forgot, for one genuine moment, to be small. And that was enough. It was always enough.